This new seasons of Helluva Boss has really been going all in with the daddy issue subplots lately, and I'm all here for it. As I'm sure most of the other fans are as well, to be honest. And to nobody's surprise, I'm sure, all of these recently introduced fathers have all been huge scumbags. Can't believe Millie's dad Joe is the nicest parental figure in the show so far. Unless you want to count Blitz too, of course. Now, with the most recent episode X's and O's introducing Moxie's father Crimson to everyone, who do you think deserves the title for the worst father in the series right now? Well, the choice does seem pretty obvious to give that award to Crimson after everything we've seen, but I want to go over what exactly makes Crimson just that much more terrible than Cash and Paimon in particular. Cash and Paimon definitely aren't good parents themselves, obviously. Paimon's biggest bad trait being his neglectful attitude towards Stolas, because he believes his royal status in the Goetia family is a more important thing to be worrying about than spending any time with his son. I mean, the guy couldn't even remember Stolas' name at first and essentially set him up to be married to Stella as his birthday present. He attempts to cheer up his son after he starts crying about their arranged marriage, but goes about it in the worst way possible, bringing him to the circus while not even being there with him physically because he refused to sit with the common folk, as he called them. Then upon noticing Stolas' fascination with Blitz's circus performance, wants to buy Blitz so he'll be forced to hang out with Stolas so he can, quote, not have to deal with him. Literally his words. The guy is a typical pompous prick who only cares about his own image. Which then brings us to Cash Buxo, Blitz's father, who was actually willing to sell his son to Paimon, at any kind of price at that. This guy is so money hungry that he was willing to negotiate for Fizz, since Fizz is the superior performer, but not for his own son. And to be clear, there shouldn't have been any kind of discussion of this, period. A proper father would have completely rejected the idea immediately, no matter how much money Paimon offers. Later, after the deal is made, Cash doesn't want to completely sell Blitz, but rather use him as a guy on the inside to steal treasures from Paimon to get more money for himself. Blitz objects to the idea at first, which in turn has Cash using manipulation tactics on his own son to get him to do his dirty work for him. Guilt-tripping Blitz about wanting to help out the mom while doing a sad puppy dog face. This is pretty much all we get from these two characters in this episode, though, due to the fact that the majority of the episode is supposed to be centered around Stolas and Blitz's relationship, how the two of them actually met, how the Grimoire deal originated, with a bit of a look into what Stolas has been going through right after the events at Ozzy's. But even with the little screen time these two characters had compared to Crimson, it was still enough to give the audience a pretty good idea of what their core values were as individuals and how bad they are at parenting. I don't want to necessarily throw out the possibility of them somehow being worse parents than Crimson in theory. However, at the current moment, the two of them just lack the screen time to come off as worse parents than Crimson did. Unlike Paimon and Cash, Crimson was one of the central characters in X's and O's, both in the present day and in Moxie's various flashbacks throughout the episode, whereas Paimon and Cash were only shown in a flashback form for about the first half of the episode, give or take. Crimson likes to preach about how important family is, yet treats them like trash. While he was present in Moxie's life as opposed to Paimon, almost all the time he spent with Moxie was negative. The only positive experience Moxie seemed to have during his childhood involved his mother. His mother seemed to be relatively okay with being married into Crimson's mafia business, this being backed up by the fact that she was helping Moxie out with gun target practice. She wasn't some cold-hearted killer, though. She treated Moxie with love and care, helping him cut his dinner when he struggled to do so, things like that. Crimson seemed to be opposed to all this affection, though, which I think likely stems from his just general misogyny / bigoted view of life in general. This guy showed many blatant displays of homophobia and stuff like that throughout the episode.
Okay, first off, Dad, I'm bisexual. Yeah, gay.
Okay, dude, okay. The only reason he even set up the whole Chaz marrying Moxie scheme was because he was under the impression Chaz had come into a lot of money, which of course we found out later was just a sham devised by Chaz to get into the crime family. Crimson also seemed to think it was completely ridiculous that Millie was essentially soloing his entire loan shark army, thinking like a woman couldn't do it, constantly shouting things along the lines of, how are you guys losing to a dame? She's just a dame. Like, using the word dame is crazy. It just feels like he has this idea of how men and women should be acting in society, you know what I mean? So when he sees his wife doing those things around Moxie, I took it as he believes his wife is babying his son too much. He tried to kick her onto the dining room table for cutting Moxie's meat, then tried to get Moxie to do his targeting practice on a real-life imp target instead of the dummies his mom had set up before. We later see another flashback scene of the two of them fighting, with one of them getting slapped. It's kind of hard to tell who it was on the receiving end because it only showed their bottom halves, but I think the safe assumption to make is Crimson did it because he slapped Moxie in the present while trying to intimidate him into marrying Chaz. What's crazy about this whole situation too is it sort of feels like a mixture of what both Paimon and Cash did to their respective sons and what they put them through. Paimon forced Stolas into marrying someone he didn't want to marry, which unfortunately ended up becoming a reality that Stolas had to deal with for several years. And Stolas is still kind of dealing with the repercussions of this divorce too. And then of course Cash using Blitz to get money, and Crimson, who wanted Moxie to marry Chaz so the Mafia family could in turn have more money. He didn't care about Millie being involved either, since he said both of them would wind up dead if Moxie didn't agree to the marriage. Speaking of dead, the most heinous thing Crimson did in this entire episode was at the very end of Moxie's flashback, right after his parents got into that fight. We see Crimson, Moxie, and a masked imp figure rowing a boat in some kind of body of water, where Crimson wants Moxie to drop the masked individual into the water to drown and perish. Moxie, of course, being hesitant of this since it's just against his nature to do something like this, is unfortunately forced into doing this since he fears his father that much. After the body falls into the water, we're able to see the shoe his mother was seen wearing floating up to the surface, meaning either Crimson had disposed of his wife at some point before this, or the masked imp Moxie was forced to push into the water was actually his own mother, whose horns were also cut off and likely displayed on Crimson's wall as if they were deer antlers a human hunter caught. Either way, it's an extremely messed up situation. This whole scene was probably the most uncomfortable I've ever felt watching an episode of the show, and me saying that isn't meant to be a negative comment towards the contents of the flashback either. It's just, I didn't think it was possible for a show like Helluva Boss to get this intense. Of course, we've gotten serious moments before, but this just felt like a whole different level to me. I don't know. I think it was the mumbling they kept doing before getting pushed into the water that really set the tone. It was just, ugh. All of these things happening over the years instilled a fear into Moxie that he could never really shake, even after escaping from that part of the greed ring. Moxie's habit of calling those of higher authority sir stemmed from his father. It can be seen as both a sign of respect as well as fear. The fear part is more so towards his father because I don't think he necessarily fears Blitz, who he would also call sir a lot. Moxie just got conditioned into calling bosses sir since that's just what his dad was, a mob boss. I will admit seeing Moxie sort of get screwed out of his way of fully confronting his father was a bit unfortunate. I understand Millie is supposed to be more of a gifted fighter and unhinged person to just beat people up between the two of them, but seeing Moxie just get tased like that after giving such a good tell-off speech to his dad wasn't the best feeling in the world, I'm not gonna lie. Plus, he didn't really get to do anything else after Millie rescued him and beat up all those sharks. She just kind of picked him up and ran off back to IMP with Blitz. It would have been super satisfying if Moxie was able to just shoot his dad or something before leaving, even if it was just in the shoulder or the leg or something. Wishing physical harm onto others isn't really a good thing to do, but let's be real, Crimson kind of deserves it. Part of me is curious if we're going to be seeing more of him in the future too. I'm sure he's got more people around the greed ring working for him besides the folks who were at the wedding. That scene of him throwing the knife at Moxie's picture gave him big Striker vibes from the end of the Moon Festival episode, and Striker is confirmed to be returning at some point this season, so you never know. But yeah, Crimson is definitely the scummiest father we've seen in Helluva Boss so far. If Paimon or Cash had more screen time, it's very possible they could have ended up worse than Crimson, like I said earlier. However, I feel like that boat scene is going to be very tough to beat in terms of scumminess level. It's a truly vile activity. I think that just about covers everything I wanted to say. Let me know in the comments below what your favorite parts of this episode were if you had any. I'd love to know your thoughts. Of course, if you did enjoy this video, be sure to leave a like down below. It helps out a ton. But for now, I will see you guys next time. Peace out. Take care. Bye-bye.